Ever have a project that requires a lot of your attention over an extended period of time? And you're doing it for yourself or for others, or a combination of the two. And it's arduous. And even though you know it's going to take a long time, it takes longer than anticipated. It's almost truculent in nature as you're trying to pass the finish line. And then when you do, you're like, now what? What do I do? That's the way I feel my life's been the last couple months. Now what? Why did I have to do that? But the year is quieting down. I'll be able to make more videos. I have a ton of music coming in that I've been putting off for various reasons. I've been traveling, which is difficult. And I spent some time in Chicago. And I used to go to Chicago a lot, 5-6 times a year, for a combination of reasons. And it felt like a home away from home at times. And I finally got to visit something called the Farnsworth House. And I've been trying to go to this place for 20 years. And whatever combination of timing, weather, restoration on the home, people I'm with had no interest in going out to Plano, Illinois. That was usually the case. I haven't been able to go. Now, many of you might know this, but it is a residence designed by Mies van der Rohe. And to me, and I know I have architects, professional architects who follow, it is the finest piece of modern architecture in America. It just is. I don't care what you think. Argue with your landscaper. It just is. But all kidding aside, I was overwhelmed to finally be there. And it was a gorgeous, sunny, 17 degrees, stiff wind off the Fox River. And that, let me tell you, there was ice building up and that home is right on the river. It was freezing, but I didn't care. The leaves still had, some action going on for the fall. I got a private tour. I got to spend over an hour inside the residence, and I was overwhelmed and could not stop smiling how beautiful it was and how I was finally able to experience the property and the residence firsthand. And I highly recommend visiting it. And it was just so overwhelming. And it's by far the greatest thing that's happened to me in 2022. And I'm just so thrilled and grateful to have finally been there. Now, I want to share that with you. You might notice that part 2 of Sounds Good to Me, the incredible documentary about my life as an influencer in the audiophile world, has not dropped. Now, it's been screened last week a couple times. The Wax hasn't screened it, which is appalling because we need West Coast screening. But people told me they wanted changes to it. Very important people at the Church of Elvis and even more Latter-day Saints, which I'm the founder, pastor, spiritual advisor, worried about my personal safety, that I'm getting too close to the deep state of the audiophile world. And I'm not scared, okay? I'm not. They thought it was too personal, too direct. I'm not scared. Look at this sweater. You think I'm scared? But I agreed to make changes on one condition, that when it's over, a director's cut is released and all the scenes that have been edited, and I've refilmed some, will be put in the director's cut. And they agreed to that. So look for that to drop late next week. And you're going to love it, but it's hot. It's controversial, man. Now, when I travel, I love to ask what people are listening to or just pay attention. From music in a store, to the cab, to an Uber, whatever, what people are listening to. And I notice with the youths, and the youths, by youths, I mean under 35. There's just another wave of synthwave. And maybe I'm late to noticing that. But this almost epic journey, video game journey music. And so I'd get in discussions about chill wave and vaporwave, because when I got back to my vinyls, or I was able to finally spend some time with music, not just stream it, I put on Washed Out 2011 Sub Pop. I don't know. I feel that Sub Pop hasn't pressed this since its release. By the way, Georgia Kid, Well, he's not a kid anymore. University of Georgia. I do not think he was smart enough to get into Georgia Tech, but still a Georgia boy. I don't know. I'm going to copy Sub Pop. Have you repressed this? Amazing. And when I think about vaporwave and chillwave, and had discussions with people about it, I think about it more than I listen to it. And it's not because I don't like it. I do like it. In fact, I did a video on waves, the microgenres. I'll link to that. And this music, as you know, creates a nostalgia. And it's a reach back to the 80s. And what's interesting, a lot of this bedroom internet music and so forth of the early 2000s, a lot of them of their ages, they weren't really alive. They're more kids of the 90s as opposed to the 80s. And it's fascinating. I'll take a hard right turn here. I think about a band like X, okay, who their reach back and their nostalgia was pretty clear, and there was a full contact with it, whether it be the rockabilly, early rock and roll, the beat vibe of the poetry. But X felt still contemporary at their peak. And I would say at the peak, X might have been the best rock and roll band in the world. That's another discussion. But with this type of music, chillwave and vaporwave, they're creating a nostalgia that isn't real. The connection to what it's amplifying doesn't feel firm. An organic connection. But I have a theory. You know, this music, a lot of this internet music at the time, obviously was also a meme on like 80s visuals, 80s capitalism. And when you think about the financial crisis of 2008, and look, we don't show a bunch of records here. We like to get philosophical. And the trauma that caused, and you might have experienced it, or you might have witnessed people who went through hell because of the financial crisis. I know I witnessed it. I saw deep pain. I saw divorces. I saw kids having to leave their friends in music, bouncing around to be able to afford places to live, and what it did to people's businesses, small businesses, jobs. Divorce, addiction, even worse things happen. And the thing about trauma is that, you know, at its basics, nostalgia is existential cope. And trauma is as addictive and as powerful as nostalgia is, and I think we all know it is. Trauma can wipe it out, black it out, because your present situation could be so consuming, so difficult, so painful, that nostalgia doesn't even feel like, it's not even soothing, it's not even there to access. It's much like REM. Theories about REM as sleep as being a soothing, not just defragging your brain and your neuronal networks, but actually soothing your brain, repairing yourself to be able to live for another day, to be able to sustain yourself in difficult situations. I feel like this music, particularly after this music too, with Vapor, it created a nostalgia of a place to go that didn't exist, but it was essentially cope. And I feel like that's why the music was so popular, because things were difficult for so many people in America and around the world. So that's just my heavy opinion. And believe me, it was a time where I was very angry. Although my life was good, I was angry because I knew, not on a political side, but you just weren't bailing out the banks. You had to bail out the financial plumbing of the world, for better or worse. But you were bailing out fiscal policy, a policy that's been exported for almost 2 decades to the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, where they're the boss of the economy. And fiscal policy, that seaside is bullshit. They just exported it out. So remember that when you're paying attention to things, how much of responsibilities have been exported that could set us up for more problems in the future. So that's what I think about. And it's so cool to now see kids listening to synthwave, a new wave of this music that doesn't feel the connection to post-financial crisis, that feels a separate from that. And maybe it's just I get too heavy and think too much about these things, but I find it interesting. So just want to share that. And then also, you know, the Blue Note classics, tone poets, They come out over and over and over. And the vast majority of the conversations are about how they sound and what's next. And we don't spend a lot of time on them. But I've done this a few times. There are times when you have to stop and realize that some of these are head and shoulders better and more important than other of the releases. And I say that with all due respect, but Evolution is a top 3 Blue Note of all time for me. In its importance, in its compositions, it's incredible. Now, I said in my title, Blue Note mistakes. And what I mean by that is that Felipe knows this, that I anticipated some of these coming out, and I've sold some of, not all of them, but sold some of the Music Matter titles because they just were going for such good money. And you could do other things with that money, get more records or do whatever. But I regret selling this Music Matters one because this cover, the deluxeness of the pictures and so forth, it's not even a matter of the sound. This sounds great. I miss it. I miss having that Music Matters version of this. And it's still expensive. But I anticipated, and I've done that with a few key titles that I regret, particularly this one. And what I want to mention on this title is not just how brilliant it is, how advanced, how many different influences other than jazz that this took on these compositions. I feel like this is one of Lee Morgan's not just best performances, most interesting performances. I'm not a jazz historian, and there's a lot of people that tell you they are. But I will tell you this, that this performance, this session on Lee Morgan had to have a lasting impact on him, particularly in his live performances. If you listen to some of the bootlegs out there, and then particularly ones that have been released by Blue Note, it really, really is a fascinating profile of Lee Morgan. And not just his versatility, but where his mind was on this session and how he was able to bring something new and different, not just to the session, but from himself. So analyzing Lee Morgan on this session, I think, is a great workshop to do. And it's just a masterpiece of a record. Really, really enjoy it. And I miss my Music Matters version. I miss looking at the pictures on that one. So that's all I got. I just want to say I'm back. Hope you're all doing well. You had no reason to subscribe for the last couple months, but maybe share it if you're feeling up to it. Take care.